SB fam, carnivores, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Bella the Steak and Butter Gal. I'm wearing red because it is nearing Chinese New Year and I just wanted to wish you all a happy Chinese New Year in advance. So today's guest, I'm going to be inviting on a fellow carnivore advocate and YouTuber, Bart Kay. Bart is a former lecturer in cardiovascular and respiratory physiology, exercise physiology, nutrition, research methods, and statistics. So he is a brilliant intellect, but also an excellent entertainer. Today's topic, we will be focusing on the juicy, hot, controversial topic of calories. Also, Bart will be one of my guest speakers in my upcoming February Carnivore Challenge. If you guys are looking for a community where you can find inspiration, accountability, support, friendship, and guidance, go to sbgmeetup.com to join in on all the Zoom calls with me, my coaches, the community, and my guest speakers. All right, let's get the video started. So without further ado, let me invite on my guest, Professor Bart Kay. Hi, Bart. Welcome.
Hey, pleasure. Glad to be here.
Before I start asking you all of my burning questions, I wanted to just get a little history and background on why you are so passionate about busting myths, about carnivore diet, about nutrition and nutrition science. How did that happen?
I guess it happened through 25, 26 years being involved in academia as a professor of health science. The longer I was there, the more I realized that everything that was being espoused, everything that was being taught was wrong. But not only wrong, but ultimately dangerous and damaging to people who would take the advice of these people who are saying with so much confidence, so much surety, and so much authority that they've claimed for themselves, that this is the way to do things, this is how you manage your weight, for example. This is the best diet for a human being, etc., etc., based on absolutely no good empirical scientific evidence of an experimental nature. It's all associations, it's all prospective cohort studies, it's all ill-disciplined, bad information, and it leads to mistakes, often fatal mistakes. I mean, just look at public health statistics. It's not that people are not following the guidelines. It's not that they're not following the advice they've been given. The advice is wrong.
So what inspired you to start a YouTube channel?
I was at a loose end, really, when I decided finally at the end of the 2018 academic year that was going to be enough for me. I no longer wanted to be involved in that industry, that indoctrination industry. I saw the standards over 25 years slip further and further and further in terms of what we were requiring students to do to pass out with degrees, to the point where when I left in 2018, I really saw it as an every child wins a prize industry. All you have to do to get a degree is enroll. And if it's too hard for you, all you need to do to get your certificate anyway is to say, I'm offended. Or, something like that. And I just thought, I don't want to have any part of that. They also started telling me what I can and can't say to students, because I was saying, actually everything you've been taught so far is bump, is no good, and here is why, here's the science behind it. The last thing that academic institutions want espoused to students is actual science. So I was butting heads up against the senior management, the deans, all that kind of stuff. So I decided no more of that. I would retire from academia. That was fine. And I was at a loose end. What was I going to do? I still wanted to teach. I still wanted to talk to groups of people, perhaps not eye to eye anymore, but that was fine. I've also had a bit of a theatrical flair throughout my life. So I thought, well, perfect. Why don't I combine education with a bit of theatre, a bit of play acting? You'll see on my YouTube, I've got 3 or 4 different YouTube channels, and they're all different characters that I play at different times, different costumes.
Wow.
So it's a bit of humor. For those that don't know, also I tend to use a lot of very, very descriptive language in some of my channels.
Yes.
Some very short words, monosyllabic words, shall we say, 4-letter ones. It's entertainment. It's for clicks. It's for the young crowd. It's mostly for the men, because my channel is followed mostly by men. But there you go. So that's what it was. I needed something to earn a living. I didn't really know that even that being a YouTube creator was an option, really. But I looked into it, and it's worked out quite well over 3 years. And now I'm at the point where I've replaced the salary from being a professor plus a bit, actually.
Wow. So much respect. For this video today with you, at least, I would love to focus on calories. This is a very popular topic that always gets thrown in my way. Does calorie counting work to achieve weight loss? And does the calories in, calories out model really govern whether or not someone loses weight or gains weight?
Awesome. So the first bit of that question, does counting calories help? Not if you don't moderate the number of calories you intake. If you just count them, then obviously it is what it is. Right. You can say at the end of the week, I've taken in 5,700 calories. Great. Did I lose any weight? Well, no, because I didn't reduce the number of calories, because 5,700 for most people is going to be far too many, for example. Mm-hmm. That being said, we then need to go to, does calories in, calories out as a theory work? My answer is a qualified yes and a qualified no. Okay. The yes part is, if you vastly, grossly reduce your your calorie intake, and I'm talking by probably 1,000 calories a day, then you can be fairly sure that you will indeed lose some fat off your body if you keep doing that for a period of time. Mm-hmm. However, that will lead you to a very high probability of developing other problems, because you will be quite nutrient deficient on a diet of such a limited amount of energy. And I want to transition away from the word calories and go toward the words effective energy in food, because basically the calorie is not a scientifically valid or accurate way to measure how much energy is contained in a food. And that's why you have to go so grossly underneath where you are right now to be sure that you'll actually get the result that you're planning, because it's so inaccurate. It's so poor as a measure of energy.
Let me just use myself as an example. I was vegan for 6 years before I went carnivore. And when I was vegan, I was still practicing this obsession over limiting my calorie intake. So I would use an app and I would calculate how many calories I should be eating, right? And I'll limit it underneath so that I can continue to lose weight. So how come I struggled so much, and I know for a fact a lot of women also did, limiting my calorie intake every single day for so long. And then when I went on carnivore, I can eat as much as I want and still maintain a great physique. So how does that happen?
Well, the short and simple answer to that is, that's the part where you say calories in, calories out does not work for most people. Yeah. Because I would suspect when you were limiting your calories, that you were probably limiting them by maybe 400, 500, 600. Because what I was sort of suggesting in the first question was, you really need to go 1,000 under to be absolutely sure that you really are going to lose. Again, let's not say weight, because it's not about weight. It's fat that we're talking about, is that what most people are trying to lose off their body. So 400, 500, 600 probably won't do it. And the reason for that is this: your basal metabolic rate is variable. Okay, when you get to these calculators online that tell you how many calories you should need every day, it'll say, what's your age, what's your gender, what's your height, what's your current weight, what's your activity level, an estimate, which people lie to themselves about for a start, and you enter those things in, and it says your your basal metabolic rate should be, probably for a woman of your stature and size, would probably say 1,500 and something basal. Mm-hmm. All right, that doesn't take into account the fact that your basal metabolic rate there can be above that. It can be sped up by your body, or it can be slowed down by your body, which in effect means that you would be expending more energy or less energy on a daily basis. One of the most potent ways that you can affect your basal metabolic rate is to consume more effective energy in your food or less. So if you say, okay, I want to lose some weight over the next few months, I'm going to control my calories underneath my usual by 500, 600, then your basal metabolic rate says, great, I'll slow down by the same amount to maintain homeostasis, to protect the position as it is now. This is our set point. This is where we are. Your body will jealously guard against that unless you go grossly underneath that suggestion, more than 1,000.
Yes.
which then subjects you to the risk of other problems. So I'm not suggesting that you do control your diet by under 1,000. By the same token, if you vastly increase your intake, then your basal metabolic rate will speed up as well. Example of that, I've just finished a 2-week period of priming doing the Steak and Butter Gang Carnivore priming program. And I was consuming 5 and 6 times my normal intake of effective energy in food for 2 weeks.
Yep.
And in that 2 weeks, my weight went down by 4 pounds. Okay, so calories in, calories out, busted.
Right.
Sorry, boys and girls, it doesn't work because it does not account. There are many reasons it doesn't work, but for one reason, it does not account for your variability in your basal metabolic rate. Simple. Also, if you eat more food, you tend to be more active. So you tend to spend more on activities of daily living. And if you eat less, you tend to spare your energy, you tend to sit around more, you tend to do less.
Okay, so what Bart just mentioned just now, the Steak and Butter Gang priming protocol, it is Coach Raymond's protocol of priming, feasting, then fasting. So Professor Bart Kay here is actually working with Coach Raymond and Coach Emily. He's actually documenting his entire progress on his YouTube channel. So definitely check it out. I'm following closely. It's very fascinating to watch. So you mentioned when we eat more, we possibly have more activity. We have more energy to move more, right? So here's my next question. Does carbs versus protein versus fat affect how we also achieve weight loss, how it kind of digests in our body and turns into energy?
Absolutely, it does, yes. Okay, so if you look at any nutrition label on any food stuff, what it will say is it'll say, this is how much protein's in here, this is how much carbohydrates in here, this is how much fat's in here, and it'll give you an energy probably in calories, sometimes in kilojoules, but they're just different means of describing the same thing. And what you'll find is for every gram of fat, it'll say 9 calories of energy is in that fat. For every gram of carbohydrate, there are 4 calories of energy, and for every gram of protein, the same 4 calories of energy, so-called, is contained in that. Problem, however, how did they work that out? How did they determine that? Well, what they did is they took a small sample of the given food that they've tested and they put it inside a thing called a bomb calorimeter, which is a closed thermodynamic system wherein there is an inner chamber where the combustion takes place. There's an outer chamber containing a bath of water, which starts at 20 degrees C. Then what they do is they rapidly and completely combust that food in a flame, basically to ash, with the outputs being carbon dioxide and water and heat. And then they measure how much the bath around the combustion has heated up. And they say that's how much energy is in the food. So several issues with that. Number one, that's not what your body does with food. It does not put it in a flame and rapidly combust it to form carbon dioxide, water, and heat. Yes. What it does is it takes reducing equivalents in the form of hydrogen atoms off the carbon skeletons, and it goes through a long convoluted process where there is energy collected at various different stages. It goes through the mitochondria, you produce ATP. So a lot of that energy is encapsulated in a chemical form, and then there's an insensible loss as heat as well. That's the actual calories part that would be, appropriate for what a human does with it. So it's just not an accurate measurement of what your body does with food. Also, it assumes that a food is going to be oxidized for energy, which is true in the case of carbohydrates and fats, but not true in the case of proteins. Proteins are incorporated into your body structures. They are in your hair, they are in your muscles, they are in your blood, they're everywhere. You're basically 65% of your dry weight is protein. And that's because you are absorbing that protein into your body structures. You're not burning that for energy. So in effect, it does not contain 4 kilocalories of energy at all, does it? It's fundamentally a ridiculous idea that would be the case. To that, usually people will say, thermodynamics, though, it's all equivalent, the heat equivalence principle and all that, the first law of thermodynamics, what are you talking about? How can you possibly be a professor and say such things? Well, here's the answer. The first law of thermodynamics, in fact, all the laws of thermodynamics, not even just the first one, they all rely entirely on an assumption that we are dealing with a thermodynamically isolated system. The math only works in that case. Anytime you step outside a thermodynamically isolated system, errors start creeping in because of the lack of thermodynamic isolation. Unfortunately, thermodynamic isolated systems do not exist anywhere in the universe. The whole idea of thermodynamics is theoretical. It was actually designed in the first instance to talk about the interconvertibility between heat and motion, thermodynamics, not thermochemical dynamics. You're a chemical engine, you're not a thermal engine. So it's not even it's just totally inappropriate to apply thermodynamics. There are only closed and open thermodynamic systems in the universe as we know it. A closed system would be like a bomb calorimeter. An open system would be like a human body. A human body is able to exchange both heat and matter in and out of the system, thereby throwing thermodynamics completely out the window. So as soon as someone says thermodynamics, though, on the calories in, calories out argument, you know they are ignorant of thermodynamics and the laws of thermodynamics, and you know you can ignore them as a pseudoscientist.
Wow.
Despite which they will say, oh, it's an irrefutable law of the universe, you clown, is what they'll say to you. No, you're the clown, because you don't understand thermodynamics. Sorry, long answer, but there you go.
I love it. Let's talk about hormones. So bringing back my experience, I did not have a cycle for 2 years on the vegan diet. So probably because the diet was not supportive for my hormones, I was not eating enough nutrients. So when I went carnivore, the cycle came back, but also my body started regulating. So how do hormones impact one's body's response to food, to calories?
Hormones are everything. Basically, hormones determine what your body is doing metabolically, whether you're building up, whether you're breaking down, whether you have enough estrogen, whether you don't have enough estrogen. And on a vegan diet, you will not have enough estrogen because there is not enough fat in that diet.
Yes.
Estrogen is based on fat. Estrogen is actually based on the cholesterol molecule. So if you're eating a low-fat, cholesterol-avoiding diet, you are asking for an estrogen problem. And if you've got vastly, grossly reduced estrogen, then you're going to get things like the cessation of your menstrual cycle. You're going to get skin conditions. You're going to get a problem maintaining strength and muscle mass. You're going to get osteoporosis if you do it for enough years. It's really, really important to follow your biological imperative, your species-appropriate, species-specific diet. There's no question whatsoever that the appropriate diet for human beings is obligate hypercarnivore, meaning, in effect, 80% of your food intake and above should be the flesh and fat of animals, preferably large ruminant animals and other things mixed in as less common. But the basis is around the large ruminants, cows, sheep. Pork's fine. I know pork's not a ruminant, but it's another good option as well. And then seafood and poultry as your sort of other occasional things that are thrown in. It's appropriately low in carbohydrate. It will support your hormonal balances. It will support your body systems, your metabolic system into knowing that it has everything it needs and doing what it's programmed to do. You're not getting in its way. You're not tripping over your feet anymore. And that's why everything came right for you when you went back to your species appropriate diet. It's as simple as that.
So you mentioned the term hypercarnivore. So when you say 80% animal foods, preferably ruminants, what can the 20% be made up of?
There is a variability in the human genome and in our history for how much non-animal products were consumed. Largely that 20% was typically in the form of very, very fibrous, usually tubers. They were nothing like the ones we've got now, because the ones we've got now are all selectively bred for. Like sweet potatoes now contain much more starch than they ever did. They were long, thin, spindly, very much more fibrous things originally, as were potatoes, all of those kind of things. So that 20% that humans were eating for the last 350,000 years or so, that was not animal material, was also not material that's going to dump glucose into your bloodstream. It was not starches. It was not sugars. It certainly wasn't fruit, and certainly not the kind of fruit we have now, which is much more sweet. Again, it's been selectively bred for over generations. Fruit was bitter, fibrous, tough, nasty stuff, and it was only available for most human beings 2 weeks a year, right before the winter, actually, when the effect of the fruit was to fatten us up for the winter. So that fibrous stuff is broken down only in the large colon, and only by a particular species or group of species of bacteria that live with us that are capable of fermenting some of the fiber and producing short-chain fatty acids for us, not carbohydrates, not glucose. So in effect, our diet for the last 350,000 years, bar about the last 8,000 years, okay, in the last 8,000 years, the agrarian revolution, we added all these plants and we started to grow grains for crops. We started to eat all this plant material. We started to selectively breed plants to make them more edible, basically. And that's been disastrous for us, actually, absolutely disastrous for us as a species. But previous to sort of from 8,000 years ago back to 350, everything we ate broke down to protein, amino acids, or fatty acids in our bodies. There was no carbohydrate to speak of at all. And that's what is appropriate for human beings.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Bart, for that.
Cool.
Okay, so next question, I do want to go back into the topic of fat loss. A lot of the viewers have this goal, especially for New Year's, to lose fat. And I often get the question of, is it more effective to restrict calories, limit food intake, or fast? So what is the difference between these two strategies?
Fasting is a form of energy restriction. It's just a form of energy restriction that lasts longer and is more complete. Because if you're fasting, you're in effect, you're taking in no energy. And so, sure, your body can react to that by slowing down its basal metabolic rate, and it will, of course, while you're fasting. However, the gap between what you are using for metabolic processes on a daily basis and what you're taking in is still thereby maintained at a level which is much more than you do by calorically restricting for a few months at 500 or 600 calories under your normal, which may not work anyway. If you want to get fat off your body rapidly, fasting is an effective way of doing that. And so long as you've gone through a period of being nutritionally complete and replete before that, I really think that Ray has got this nailed down, and he's got this absolutely right.
Yes.
And you should prime before you fast. So I would suggest to people a period of 2 weeks of priming as per the Steak and Butter program. All you need to do is join the Steak and Butter crew and they will tell you all about it. And I'm sure Bella will give you all the links and stuff under the video here for that. As I say, I did 2 weeks of absolutely stuffing my face stupid, literally 3 times a day. Yeah. With meat and fat 5 and 6 times my usual intake of food for 2 weeks, during which time I lost 4.5 pounds. Okay. Now I've been fasting for the last 4 days and I am now 10 pounds down.
Wow. 10 pounds, 10 more or 10 total now?
10 total. So an additional 6 pounds in that 4 days. Wow. Now, most of that will be water. Yes. The reason I say that is because the last 3 days I've been dry fasting, meaning that not only am I not taking in food, I'm also not consuming fluid at all. No fluid passes my lips for the last 3 days. Now, why is that a good thing? Under appropriate supervision from somebody who knows what they're doing, please, boys and girls. Okay, don't just go and do this by yourself. Have a coach who you will be in contact with on a daily basis to count your fingers and toes. All right. Anyway, that said, that disclaimer made, when you consume no fluid for a period of a few days, what happens is your blood slowly becomes a bit concentrated. Not too much, not so that it's going to turn into glue and you're going to die or anything silly like that. Yeah. You get a bit of a concentration in your blood of stuff that's in your blood, and your liver senses that, and it says, I need to rapidly produce some metabolic water because this guy's not drinking. And my blood's going to turn into glue if I don't do that. And so what occurs then is you rapidly start breaking down fat, and the end products of breaking down fat is carbon dioxide, which you breathe out, and H2O, water.
Wow.
So you produce your own. So by withdrawing the drinking of water, you encourage your body to burn your fat to make water, thus you get fat off your body. Highly effective. There are also a whole bunch of other benefits to dry fasting as well, including autophagy, which we'll talk about another day, the release of adult stem cells, which we'll talk about another day, the repair and renewal of tissues, which we'll talk about another day, and some anecdotal suggestions that it may well be associated with improvements in all sorts of medical conditions as well. All for another day, though. But to follow my progress in all of that, you can check out my channel where the whole process is being played open hand with the coaches. We have a weekly meeting. Nothing gets edited out, and it all ends up on the channel.
Thank you all for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Bart. As always, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and feel free to share this video with friends and family. I have linked down in the description box all of the places where you can find more of Bart Kay. And again, Bart will be one of my guest speakers in the February Carnivore Challenge coming up. So if you would like to join in on all of the Zoom calls with my community, the coaches, and the guest speakers, just go to svgmeetup.com. I'll see you guys in the next video. SVG out.